The rain drizzled lightly over the old, cobbled streets as the trio assembled in the darkened briefing room. A projection flickered to life, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Agent Jack O'Connor, tall and stern, adjusted his tie with a sense of foreboding. Beside him, tech expert Zoe Marshall fiddled with her devices, while Finn Wallace, their empath and medium, remained unusually quiet, his eyes distant. Their superior, Director Hargrove, entered with a manila folder clutched in his hands. "We have a situation," he began without preamble. "Bettiscombe Manor, known for the legend of the Screaming Skull. The Carver family has taken up residence there." The Carvers. Zoe's voice was incredulous. "As in the criminal family linked to those ritual murders?" "Precisely," Hargrove confirmed. "They've been dabbling in something darker. Local authorities are out of their depth. We need you three to investigate and, if necessary, neutralize any threats, supernatural or otherwise." Jack exchanged glances with Zoe and Finn. The Carvers were notorious for their brutality, but a haunted manor with a cursed skull added a new, sinister dimension. They knew this would be no ordinary mission. Their journey to Dorset was uneventful, the quiet of the countryside almost deceptive. The manor loomed ahead, its ancient stone walls partially concealed by creeping ivy. The sky darkened as they approached, thunder rumbling ominously in the distance. "This place gives me the creeps," Zoe muttered, scanning the area with her thermal imaging device. "I'm picking up some weird heat signatures." Jack nodded, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." As they entered the manor, the air grew noticeably colder. The grand entrance hall was a tableau of decaying opulence. Dust-covered chandeliers, cracked marble floors, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors glaring down at them. "Welcome to Bettiscombe Manor," Finn said with a wry smile. "Home sweet haunted home." They set up their base of operations in a dilapidated drawing room, their equipment humming to life. Zoe monitored the various sensors, while Finn attempted to connect with any lingering spirits. "It's strange," Finn remarked, frowning. "I can feel a presence, but it's elusive, like it's hiding from me." Before they could delve deeper, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the manor. The team froze, exchanging tense looks. "That sounded like it came from the attic," Jack said, already moving towards the staircase. They climbed the creaky, winding stairs, their flashlights casting long shadows. At the top, they found a small, dusty room, dominated by a single object, a skull resting on a pedestal. The air around it seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy. "The Screaming Skull," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible. "We need to be careful." Finn reached out, his hand trembling slightly. As his fingers brushed the skull, a powerful force knocked him back, slamming him into the wall. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. "Finn!" Jack and Zoe rushed to his side, but before they could help him, the attic door slammed shut with a deafening bang. They were trapped, and then the skull began to scream. The scream pierced the air, a high-pitched wail that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the attic. Jack and Zoe covered their ears, the sound almost unbearable. Finn lay motionless, his face pale in the dim light. "We need to get out of here," Zoe shouted over the noise, her eyes wide with fear. Jack nodded, trying the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. He turned to Zoe, who was already setting up a portable EMP device designed to disrupt supernatural entities. The device buzzed to life, emitting a low hum that gradually drowned out the scream. The silence that followed was almost as unsettling as the noise had been. Jack knelt beside Finn, checking for a pulse. "He's alive, but we need to get him downstairs." As they carefully maneuvered Finn down the staircase, the manor seemed to come alive around them. Shadows shifted in the corners of their vision, and the temperature dropped further. They finally reached the drawing room, laying Finn on an old, moth-eaten sofa. Zoe quickly scanned him with her equipment. "No physical injuries, but he's in some kind of psychic shock. We need to get him out of here." Before they could make a plan, the room's atmosphere changed again. A dark, oppressive presence filled the air, and the shadows coalesced into a figure, a tall, menacing shape with glowing red eyes. Jack instinctively drew his weapon, though he knew it would be useless against a ghost. "You trespass where you do not belong," the figure intoned, its voice echoing unnaturally. "We're here to stop the Carvers," Jack said firmly. "We mean no harm." The figure laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down their spines. "The Carvers are but pawns. The Skull's curse is far older and far more powerful than you can imagine." Zoe took a step forward, holding up a digital recorder. "Who are you? Why are you haunting this place?" The figure's eyes flared. "I am bound to this skull. I was wronged, and now I seek vengeance. You cannot stop what is coming." With that, the figure dissipated into the shadows, leaving the room feeling even colder than before. Jack holstered his gun, shaking his head. "This just keeps getting better." Zoe sighed, sitting down beside Finn. "We need to find out more about this curse. There has to be a way to stop it." As Finn began to stir, Jack and Zoe heard movement from the hallway. They exchanged wary glances, preparing for another encounter. But instead of a ghostly figure, they found a man, disheveled, wide-eyed, and clearly terrified. "Help me," he pleaded. "They're coming. The Carvers. They're coming back." Jack grabbed the man by the shoulders. "Who are you? What do you know about the Carvers?" "My name is Thomas," the man stammered. "I was their prisoner. They made me help with the rituals, but I escaped. They're coming back to finish what they started." Zoe's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? What rituals?" Thomas glanced around nervously. "The skull. They're trying to harness its power. They think it can give them control over the spirits here. They're insane." Finn, now fully conscious, struggled to sit up. "We need to stop them. If they complete the ritual, who knows what kind of power they'll unleash." Jack nodded, determination in his eyes. "We're going to need more than just our gadgets for this. We need to find out everything we can about the skull and the curse." Zoe began scanning through historical documents on her tablet, while Finn focused on recovering his strength. Jack turned to Thomas. "You're going to tell us everything you know, and then we're going to put an end to this nightmare." As the night deepened, the team prepared for the next phase of their investigation. The manor was filled with secrets, and they were determined to uncover them all. But they knew time was running out, both for them and for anyone who dared to cross paths with the Screaming Skull of Bettiscombe Manor. The manor seemed to breathe around them, its ancient walls holding secrets and stories long forgotten. Zoe's fingers flew over her tablet, uncovering centuries-old records about the skull and its malevolent history. Jack and Finn listened intently, Thomas's frantic pacing in the background adding to the tension. It said that the skull belonged to an African slave brought to Bettiscombe Manor in the 17th century, Zoe began, her voice hushed. The slave was unjustly murdered, and his spirit cursed the skull. If the skull is ever removed from the manor, it screams until it's returned. Jack frowned. But why would the Carvers want it? Zoe looked up, her eyes dark with worry. They believe the skull can grant them control over the spirits, giving them supernatural power. They think it will make them invincible. Finn, now more alert, interjected. And if they succeed, we'll have a lot more to worry about than just ghosts. Thomas, still agitated, finally spoke up. There's more. The Carvers found an old grimoire, an ancient book of dark magic. They've been using it to amplify the skull's power. They're planning a final ritual tonight, during the witching hour. Jack stood up, his jaw set. We can't let that happen. We need to find that grimoire and destroy it. They split up, each taking a section of the manor to search for the book. Zoe headed to the library, Jack to the study, and Finn, with Thomas reluctantly in tow, to the basement. The library was a maze of dusty shelves and forgotten tomes. Zoe's flashlight flickered over the spines of countless books until she spotted one that seemed out of place, bound in dark, cracked leather and emitting a faint, eerie glow. She reached for it, but as her fingers brushed the cover, a cold hand clamped onto her shoulder. She spun around, her heart racing, but no one was there. The temperature plummeted, and ghostly whispers filled the air. Summoning her courage, Zoe grabbed the book and sprinted back to the drawing room. Meanwhile, Jack searched the study. Papers littered the desk, but no sign of the grimoire. Frustrated, he kicked a chair, only to hear a hollow thud. Kneeling down, he found a loose floorboard and pried it up, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, he found ritualistic items and a map of the manor marked with symbols. In the basement, Finn and Thomas faced their own horrors. The damp, musty air was thick with the stench of decay. As they navigated the narrow corridors, they stumbled upon a makeshift altar covered in blood. Thomas recoiled, but Finn forced himself to examine it. Among the grisly artifacts, he found pages torn from the grimoire, detailing the final ritual. They regrouped in the drawing room, sharing their findings. "We have what we need," Jack said, his voice resolute. "We know where the ritual is happening. We need to stop them and destroy that book." Thomas, visibly shaken but determined, nodded. "I'll help you. We can't let them win." As midnight approached, they steeled themselves for the confrontation. The manor's shadows seemed to grow darker, and the air crackled with tension. They knew the carvers would stop at nothing to complete the ritual, but they were ready to fight with everything they had. The clock struck midnight, and the air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread. The team moved stealthily through the labyrinthine halls of Bettiscombe Manor, guided by the symbols on the map Jack had found. They could hear the distant chanting of the carvers, a low, menacing drone that reverberated through the walls. "Stay close and stay quiet," Jack whispered, leading the way with his gun drawn. They reached the grand ballroom, the epicenter of the manor, where the carvers had prepared for the final ritual. The room was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting eerie shadows on the walls. At the center of the room was a large, ornate circle inscribed with ancient runes. The skull sat on a pedestal at the heart of the circle, surrounded by the Carver family members, all clad in dark robes. "We need to disrupt the ritual before they complete it," Zoe murmured, her eyes scanning the room for a weak point. Finn, feeling the intense spiritual energy, nodded. "We'll have to be quick and precise. They're too powerful to confront directly." As they devised a plan, the chanting grew louder, reaching a fever pitch. The lead carver, a tall, imposing figure with piercing blue eyes, raised the grimoire high above his head. The runes began to glow with an otherworldly light, and the skull emitted a low, ominous hum. Thomas, shaking with fear, pointed to a side door. "There's a back entrance. We can use it to get closer without being seen." They crept along the perimeter of the room, using the shadows to their advantage. Jack signaled for them to take their positions. Zoe and Finn would disrupt the ritual while Jack and Thomas provided cover. As Zoe and Finn moved into position, the lead carver began to recite the final incantation. The air crackled with dark energy, and the skull's hum grew louder, almost deafening. Zoe took a deep breath and activated her EMP device, causing the lights to flicker and the runes to dim. The carvers reacted immediately, their chanting faltering. Finn seized the moment, using his empathic abilities to create a psychic barrier around the skull. The lead carver, enraged, turned towards them, his eyes blazing with fury. "You dare interfere!" he bellowed, raising his hands to unleash a dark spell. Jack and Thomas sprang into action, firing their weapons at the carvers. The room erupted into chaos, with bullets whizzing through the air and dark magic crackling like lightning. Zoe rushed to the skull, her fingers trembling as she grabbed it and placed it in a containment unit. Finn, using every ounce of his strength, maintained the psychic barrier, but he could feel it weakening. The lead carver advanced on them, his hands glowing with dark energy. "You cannot stop us. The power of the skull will be ours." Zoe, thinking quickly, grabbed the grimoire from the altar and held it above the containment unit. "If you want the skull, you'll have to get through me." The lead carver hesitated, his eyes flicking between the grimoire and the skull. "You wouldn't dare." With a defiant grin, Zoe opened the containment unit and tossed the grimoire inside. The dark energy of the book and the skull collided, creating a blinding flash of light. The carvers screamed as the power of the ritual backfired, engulfing them in a vortex of dark magic. When the light finally faded, the carvers were gone. Their forms dissipated into nothingness. The room was eerily quiet, the air thick with the scent of ozone. Jack, Zoe, Finn, and Thomas stood in stunned silence, their breaths ragged. "We did it," Finn said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zoe, still clutching the containment unit, nodded. But at what cost? Thomas, tears streaming down his face, looked at the spot where the carvers had stood. "They're gone. It's finally over." Jack placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "We need to make sure this never happens again. The skull and the grimoire must be destroyed." As they made their way out of the manor, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon, they knew their battle was far from over. But for now, they had won a small victory against the darkness. And as the manor faded into the distance, they could still hear the faint echo of a scream, a reminder of the malevolent force that had once called Bettiscombe Manor home. The team left Bettiscombe Manor, but their respite was short-lived. Jack received a call from an old contact, Professor Malcolm Graves, an expert in occult artifacts. "I've found something disturbing," Graves said. "Meet me at St. Bartholomew's Church in an hour. It's urgent." St. Bartholomew's Church was a dilapidated, centuries-old building on the outskirts of town. As they arrived, they found Graves waiting in the nave, surrounded by ancient tomes and artifacts. His face was pale, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. "What's this about, Professor?" Jack asked, glancing at the array of relics. Graves pointed to a faded map spread across the altar. "I've been researching the origins of the skull and the Carver family. It led me to an old legend about a hidden crypt beneath this church. The crypt supposedly contains the remains of other cursed artifacts, including more skulls." Zoe's eyes widened. "More skulls? As powerful as the one we found?" Graves nodded. "Possibly even more so. The carvers were just a small part of a larger, darker history. If these artifacts fall into the wrong hands, we could be facing a catastrophe." Finn shivered, the air in the church growing colder. "We need to find that crypt and secure those artifacts before anyone else does." They searched the church for an entrance to the crypt. Zoe's sharp eyes caught a hidden latch beneath the altar. With a creak, a trapdoor opened, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Jack led the way, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air grew mustier as they descended. The walls were lined with bones, arranged in macabre patterns. "This place gives me the creeps," Thomas muttered, clutching his cross. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a massive stone door inscribed with runes similar to those they'd seen at Bettiscombe Manor. Zoe deciphered the symbols, murmuring, "To enter, one must leave all hope behind." With a deep breath, Jack pushed the door open, revealing a vast crypt lit by eerie blue flames. At the center stood a stone pedestal, upon which rested several skulls, each glowing faintly. Around the pedestal were various ancient artifacts, all emitting a malevolent aura. "We need to take these artifacts and secure them," Graves said, his voice trembling. "But be careful. They're likely protected by dark magic." As they approached the pedestal, the temperature dropped further, and shadows seemed to move on their own. Zoe reached for one of the skulls, but a spectral figure materialized in front of her, its eyes glowing with malice. "You shall not take what is ours," the ghostly guardian hissed, lunging at Zoe. Jack fired his weapon, the bullets passing harmlessly through the specter. Finn, thinking quickly, used his psychic abilities to create a barrier around the team. The ghost shrieked in rage, but Finn held firm, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Grab the artifacts, quickly," Finn shouted, his voice strained. Zoe and Graves hurriedly gathered the skulls and other relics, placing them in containment units. The ghost's attacks grew more frantic, but Finn's barrier held just long enough for them to secure the last artifact. "Let's get out of here," Jack yelled, leading the way back up the stairs. As they emerged into the church, the ghost screams faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. They sealed the trapdoor behind them, ensuring no one else could access the crypt. "We need to destroy these artifacts," Jack said, his expression grim. "Or at least find a way to neutralize their power." Graves nodded. "I have some ideas, but it won't be easy. These artifacts are deeply rooted in dark magic. We'll need all the help we can get." Back at Graves' cluttered study, the team gathered around a large oak table. The ancient artifacts lay before them, each one pulsating with a faint, sinister energy. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with the weight of their discovery. Graves paced nervously. These artifacts are not just cursed, they're bound by a powerful ritual. To destroy them, we need to perform a counter-ritual, but the instructions are scattered across various ancient texts. Zoe scanned the artifacts, her mind racing. What if we combine our knowledge? Finn's psychic abilities, my tech skills, and your expertise in ancient texts, Professor. Graves stopped pacing, considering her suggestion. It's worth a try. We'll need to decipher these texts quickly. The longer these artifacts remain intact, the greater the risk. They divided the work, each focusing on a different aspect of the counter-ritual. Jack and Thomas kept watch, ensuring no one disturbed their intense study session. Hours turned into days as they pored over the ancient texts. Finn's psychic insights proved invaluable, helping them decode the cryptic instructions. Zoe used her tech skills to piece together fragments of the ritual, while Graves provided historical context and expertise. Finally, after days of exhausting work, they had a plan. "We'll need to perform the counter-ritual at the site of the original curse," Graves explained. "That means returning to Bettiscombe Manor." The team exchanged uneasy glances. The manor was the epicenter of the malevolent energy, and returning there was fraught with danger. But they had no choice if they were to neutralize the artifacts. Under cover of darkness, they made their way back to the manor. The air crackled with an ominous energy, and shadows seemed to move of their own accord. They set up in the grand ballroom, where the final ritual had taken place. Graves began the incantation, his voice steady despite the tension. Zoe and Finn stood ready with their containment units, while Jack and Thomas kept a vigilant watch. As Graves chanted, the artifacts began to vibrate, their malevolent energy intensifying. The air grew colder, and ghostly whispers filled the room. Suddenly, the specter they had encountered in the crypt reappeared, its eyes blazing with fury. "You cannot undo what has been done," the ghost shrieked, lunging at Graves. Jack fired at the specter, but his bullets had no effect. Finn focused his psychic energy, creating a barrier around Graves. Zoe activated the containment units, directing them towards the ghost. The specter screamed, its form distorting as it fought against the containment. Graves continued the incantation, his voice unwavering. The artifacts glowed brighter, their energy reaching a peak. With a final, earth-shattering scream, the specter was drawn into the containment unit, and the artifacts shattered, their malevolent energy dissipating into the air. The room was plunged into silence, the oppressive energy lifting. Graves collapsed to his knees, exhausted but triumphant. "It's done," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The curse is broken." The team breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had faced unimaginable horrors, but they had emerged victorious. The artifacts were destroyed, and the malevolent energy that had plagued Bettiscombe Manor was finally gone. As they left the manor for the last time, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, they knew they had made a difference. But they also knew that their work was far from over. Dark forces still lurked in the shadows, and they would need to stay vigilant. For now, though, they had earned a moment of peace, and as they walked away from the manor, the ghostly screams of the past finally silenced. They couldn't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. With the artifacts destroyed and the specter banished, the team returned to Graves' study, hoping to find some respite. But their victory was short-lived. A knock on the door revealed an unexpected visitor, Rachel Carver, the estranged daughter of the notorious Carver family. "I need your help," Rachel pleaded, her eyes haunted. "My family is hiding something terrible. I think it's connected to the curse. Rachel explained that she had discovered an old journal belonging to her ancestor, Edward Carver. It detailed dark rituals and hinted at a hidden chamber beneath Bettiscombe Manor. The journal mentions something called the final sacrifice. I think my family is planning to use it to reclaim their power. Jack frowned. We need to go back. If there's another hidden chamber, it might still be active. The team, exhausted but determined, agreed. They returned to Bettiscombe Manor under the cover of night. Rachel led them to a decrepit library where she had found the journal. She pointed to a large, ornate bookshelf. The chamber is behind this. Thomas and Finn heaved the bookshelf aside, revealing a concealed door. Jack pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. They steeled themselves and descended once more. The hidden chamber was vast, lit by flickering torches. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the walls were lined with ancient, grotesque statues. In the center of the room was an altar, stained with blood. The sight sent shivers down their spines. Graves examined the altar. This is where the final sacrifice would take place. It's a ritual to summon something far worse than the specter we faced. Suddenly, they heard footsteps echoing down the stairs. Jack motioned for silence, and they hid behind the statues. Moments later, several figures entered the chamber, dressed in dark robes. At their head was none other than Rachel's father, Victor Carver. "The time has come," Victor intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber. "We will reclaim our power tonight." Rachel gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We won't let them," he whispered. The team watched as Victor began chanting in an ancient guttural language. The torches' flames grew higher, and the statues seemed to come alive, their eyes glowing red. The air crackled with dark energy. Finn, sensing the danger, closed his eyes and focused his psychic abilities, trying to disrupt the ritual. Zoe, using her tech skills, hacked into her portable EMP device, hoping to cause a distraction. As Victor reached the climax of his chant, Finn unleashed a burst of psychic energy. The statues faltered, their glow dimming. Zoe activated the EMP, causing the torches to flicker and the room to plunge into chaos. Jack and Thomas sprang into action, tackling the robed figures. Graves and Rachel confronted Victor, who was momentarily stunned by the disruption. "You won't succeed," Graves said, his voice steady. "The curse ends here." Victor sneered. "You have no idea what you're meddling with." Rachel, her voice shaking but resolute, stepped forward. "This ends now, Father." With a swift motion, Rachel grabbed the ceremonial dagger from the altar and plunged it into the ground. The chamber shook violently, and a blinding light filled the room. The robed figures screamed as the dark energy was sucked into the dagger, which shattered into pieces. The shaking subsided, and the room fell silent. The robed figures lay unconscious, and Victor was on his knees, defeated. The dark energy that had permeated the chamber was gone. Rachel turned to the team, tears in her eyes. "It's over. We've stopped them." Jack nodded, his face grim. "But we need to make sure this can never happen again." The team bound the unconscious cultists and carried them out of the hidden chamber. With Victor Carver in custody, they had effectively dismantled the heart of the dark ritual. But as they emerged into the night, an eerie calm settled over Bettiscombe Manor. Rachel, still shaken, looked at Jack. "What now?" Jack sighed. "We need to ensure no one can use this place for evil again. We should destroy the hidden chamber." Back in Graves' study, they planned their next move. "We need explosives," Zoe said. "I can rig something to collapse the chamber." Graves nodded. "I'll handle the containment of the artifact's remnants. We can't leave anything to chance." They returned to the manor one last time, their nerves on edge. Zoe and Finn set up the explosives around the entrance to the hidden chamber, working quickly and efficiently. Meanwhile, Jack, Thomas, and Rachel kept watch, their eyes scanning the darkened manor for any signs of danger. As Zoe finished setting the charges, Finn's psychic senses tingled. He turned to Jack, his face pale. "Something's coming. Something powerful." Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a cold wind swept through the manor. From the darkness, a shadowy figure emerged, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. Its eyes glowed with an unholy light. "It's the Guardian," Graves whispered. "The last line of defense for the dark power." The shadow creature lunged at them, its claws outstretched. Jack fired his weapon, but the bullets passed through it harmlessly. Thomas swung his cross, but the creature dodged effortlessly. "Zoe, we need those charges now," Jack yelled. Zoe frantically finished the last connection and activated the timer. "We have 5 minutes. Get to the safe zone." As they retreated, the shadow creature pursued them, its form elongating and stretching to cover the distance. Finn concentrated, creating a psychic barrier to slow it down, but the creature's relentless assault weakened him. Rachel, desperate, grabbed a piece of the shattered ceremonial dagger. Maybe this can help. She threw the fragment at the creature. To their surprise, the shadow recoiled, its form destabilizing. "Of course," Graves said. "The dagger's fragments are infused with the same energy. It can harm the creature." Jack, seizing the opportunity, grabbed another fragment and thrust it into the shadow. The creature screamed, its form flickering and breaking apart. But it wasn't enough to destroy it completely. "We need to lure it into the chamber before the charges go off," Jack shouted. They led the creature back towards the hidden chamber, Finn using his psychic abilities to taunt and weaken it further. With seconds to spare, they pushed the creature into the chamber and bolted out, slamming the door behind them. The manor shook violently as the explosives detonated. The ground caved in, sealing the hidden chamber and the creature within it. The team barely escaped the collapsing structure, emerging into the night, breathless but triumphant. Rachel looked back at the ruins of Bettiscombe Manor, tears streaming down her face. "It's over. It's finally over." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did well, Rachel. We all did." As dawn broke, the team returned to Graves' study to regroup. They had faced unimaginable horrors, but they had emerged victorious. The dark power that had plagued Bettiscombe Manor was finally vanquished. Graves spoke, his voice solemn but hopeful. "We've stopped this evil, but there are always more dangers out there. We need to stay vigilant." Zoe nodded, a determined look in her eyes. "We'll be ready. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Jack smiled, the weight of their victory lifting his spirits. "For now, let's get some rest. We've earned it." As they left Graves' study, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. They knew that their work was far from over, but they also knew that they had the strength and determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The ghosts of Bettiscombe Manor were finally at rest, and the team was ready for their next adventure. As the first light of dawn illuminated the horizon, the team returned to Graves' study to regroup. Their victory over the dark forces at Bettiscombe Manor had been hard won, but it left many questions unanswered. The journal Rachel had found hinted at more dark secrets hidden within the Carver family's history. Rachel, now more determined than ever to uncover the truth, laid the journal on the table. "This journal mentions other locations, places where my family conducted their rituals. We need to investigate them." Jack nodded, his face grim. "We need to make sure this darkness is fully eradicated." The first location mentioned in the journal was an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of the nearby town. The team wasted no time and set out, their nerves on edge. The chapel, overgrown with ivy and surrounded by dense woods, exuded an eerie silence. Thomas, ever the practical one, broke the silence. "Looks like the perfect place for some ancient evil rituals." As they entered the chapel, the air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding settled over them. The interior was covered in dust and cobwebs, the pews rotting and broken. At the front, an altar bore the same sinister markings they had seen at Bettiscombe Manor. Graves examined the altar closely. These symbols are different. They're older, more powerful. Finn, his psychic senses heightened, walked around the chapel, feeling the residual energy. "There's something beneath us," he said, pointing to a trapdoor concealed under a rug. With a heave, Jack and Thomas opened the trapdoor. revealing a staircase descending into darkness. They exchanged uneasy glances before descending, flashlights cutting through the blackness. The underground chamber was much like the one at Bettiscombe, but this time it was filled with relics, ancient books, ceremonial daggers, and grotesque statues. In the center was a large stone tablet inscribed with cryptic runes. Zoe took out her tablet, scanning the runes. These inscriptions detail a ritual to summon an entity known as the Shadow Man. It requires a blood sacrifice. Rachel, her voice shaking, read from the journal. The Carver family believed they could control the Shadow Man and use its power to dominate their rivals. Suddenly, they heard footsteps echoing above them. The team tensed, ready for another confrontation. But instead of cultists, it was the local sheriff and his deputies, guns drawn. "We received a tip about strange activities here," the sheriff said, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "Care to explain?" Jack stepped forward, hands raised. "We're investigating a series of ritualistic murders linked to the Carver family. We have evidence that might interest you." The sheriff glanced at Rachel, recognizing her. "Rachel Carver, what's your involvement in this?" Rachel explained everything, her voice steady despite the fear and exhaustion. The sheriff listened, his expression softening. "We'll need to secure this place and investigate further. But for now, let's get you all to safety." As they emerged from the chapel, the morning sun breaking through the trees, Rachel turned to the team. "There's one more location mentioned in the journal. It's the old family estate. If there's anything left to uncover, it'll be there." Jack nodded, a sense of purpose in his eyes. "Then that's where we'll go. We end this once and for all." The Carver family estate, a crumbling mansion surrounded by overgrown gardens, stood as a silent witness to decades of dark history. The team, along with the sheriff and his deputies, approached with caution, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. As they entered the estate, the air grew thick with malevolence. The walls, adorned with faded portraits of stern-faced ancestors, seemed to watch their every move. In the grand foyer, a large portrait of Edward Carver loomed, his eyes almost lifelike in their intensity. Rachel pointed to a door at the end of the hall. "The journal says there's a hidden passage behind the study. That's where the final ritual chamber should be." They moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty mansion. In the study, Graves found a lever disguised as a book. With a creak, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. The underground chamber was vast, lit by torches that flickered ominously. At the center, a massive stone altar bore the marks of countless rituals. Surrounding it were the remains of ancient sacrifices, bones, skulls, and dark stains that hinted at unspeakable acts. Finn, his psychic senses on high alert, felt a presence. "We're not alone." From the shadows, a figure emerged. Victor Carver, his face twisted with madness, stood before them. "You think you can stop the legacy of the Carver family? You're too late." Jack stepped forward, his voice steady. "It ends here, Victor." Victor laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the chamber. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." He raised his arms, and the room began to shake. The shadows coalesced into a towering figure, the Shadow Man, its eyes glowing with malice. The sheriff and his deputies aimed their guns, but Victor was faster. With a wave of his hand, he sent them flying against the walls. The team braced themselves, ready for the final battle. Rachel, clutching a ceremonial dagger, faced her father. "This is for all the lives you've ruined." She lunged at him, the dagger glinting in the torchlight. The Shadow Man roared, its form shifting and writhing. Jack and Thomas attacked, their weapons passing through the creature harmlessly. Zoe, using her tech skills, activated an EMP device, hoping to disrupt the creature's form. Graves chanted an incantation, his voice steady despite the chaos. The runes on the stone tablet began to glow, binding the Shadow Man. "Keep it distracted," Graves shouted. Finn, using his psychic abilities, focused on Victor, trying to break his concentration. Victor screamed, clutching his head as the psychic assault intensified. Rachel, with a final burst of strength, drove the dagger into her father's heart. Victor gasped, his eyes wide with shock and pain. The Shadow Man faltered, its form disintegrating as the binding spell took hold. With a final roar, the Shadow Man was pulled into the stone tablet, its energy dissipating. The chamber fell silent, the malevolent presence gone. Rachel, tears streaming down her face, looked at her father's lifeless body. It's over. The curse is broken. The sheriff, battered but alive, helped his deputies to their feet. We need to secure this place. Make sure no one can ever use it again. Jack nodded. We'll help. This needs to be done right. As they worked to seal the chamber, the first light of dawn broke through the cracks in the ceiling. The team, exhausted but triumphant, knew that they had ended the Carver family's dark legacy. Graves, his voice filled with hope, spoke. We've faced great darkness and emerged victorious, but we must remain vigilant. There are always more mysteries to uncover, more evils to face. Jack smiled, a sense of camaraderie and purpose filling his heart. And we'll face them together. As they left the estate, the morning sun rising over the horizon, they knew their work was far from over. But for now, they had earned a moment of peace, knowing they had made the world a little safer.